Episode number 408 of Get Paid for Your Pad. Today we are talking about ideal operations for growing and scaling an Airbnb hosting business. What's up, Eric?
What's up, Jasper?
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm enjoying my week off.
Yeah, how's your week off going? When was the last time you had a week off?
Well, not too long ago. I mean, I guess when I was down in Nicaragua, I was able to take some days off, so it was cool. But yeah, it's good. You know, family in town. Touring them around San Diego, and just relaxing. But honestly, man, it's like I don't want a week off. You know, like 3 or 4 days is fine to rest and get recharged. But after that, I'm just like, there's so much stuff I want to get after, especially with this property that we're buying next week. My mind is just on that and what we're working on. So, but it's good, dude. It's good. I'm enjoying it.
Awesome, man.
Enjoying the family time.
Yeah, that's great, man. I have some family time as well this weekend. My nephew is visiting all the way from Amsterdam. He's my friend is a pilot, and he can take a companion on the flight pretty much for free. So I got him to bring my nephew for his birthday. So it's gonna be fun. He's almost turning 18, so he's almost like a man.
That's awesome, dude. Enjoy.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. And today we're talking about operations. You know, do you know that I looked at all the podcasts that we've done, like literally all the podcasts of Get Paid for Your Pad, right? This is like 408 episodes, including this one today. And I looked at the one that was downloaded the most so far this year. And you're never going to guess which one that is.
Which one is it?
It's a podcast on systems.
Systems. That makes sense. That makes sense. Everyone's trying to figure out systems.
I talked for half an hour about systems, and that's the most downloaded podcast this year, which blew my mind.
Yeah. Well, I think people recognize how important it is, but it's not if you're not a system-minded person, it becomes very challenging to build these things, right? So we're constantly, for me at least, I'm constantly reaching out, trying to figure out what other people are doing with systems and processes to remove me from the business. But that's good, man. That's good. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And I'm happy we can bring some value here for hosts.
Yeah. So if you're listening right now and you want to check out that episode, it's number 376. The title is How to Use Systems to Make Your Life Easier as an Airbnb Host. That episode, like I go pretty detailed on like what a system is and how you build a system, all of that. But today we're going to talk a bit more high level, right? Operations is one of the 3 pillars in the Legends X program. Essentially, you and I discovered, you know, through years and years working with students, it's really like 3 things that we need to focus on to grow the Airbnb business, which is vision, which is what we talked about last week, and operations and skill. And skill is what we're going to talk about next week. But yeah, why don't you kick it off? Like what's in your mind? Like what does it mean, operations?
Yeah, what's interesting, man, is you know, the more hosts that I talk to for Legends X, when people think systems, their mind automatically goes to like a pricing tool or a PMS or whatever it is, right? Like the technology that we're used to when you're starting an Airbnb business of like, oh, I can automate this through a pricing tool and automation or like property management software. And yes, that's part of systems. But when we talk about operations and when we talk about systems, we talk about how do we turn our business into a machine, documenting every aspect of our business, right? In a way to where anybody can jump into the team and we can pass it to them and say, this is how we run our customer service department. This is how we run our revenue management department. This is how we run our maintenance department, right? That's what we talk about when we talk about operations and systems. So yes, PMS, like property management software and, messaging automation and pricing tools, that's part of operations, but that's such a small part of what I believe is the difference between everyone needs that stuff in short-term rental business, but we have to really get world class at creating documented processes around how we run our company. And I know this stuff doesn't sound sexy. This is part of the business that doesn't sound sexy, but what's sexy about it is that's what gets us out of the business, right? Like creating those types of processes and creating that type of operation actually gets us out of our day-to-day behind the Airbnb business or any business in general, right? So there's only so much we can do with a property management software and messaging automation. The whole idea behind this is like everything that we're doing this now, right? We're hiring a new VA for overnight success to help us to get out of some of the smaller day-to-day stuff. Right. So what are we doing now? Like we're documenting throughout the day all the small things that are repeated tasks that are constantly coming up in our business that we don't necessarily need to do, but they have to get done. But somebody could do at least 80% as well as we do at that task. We're documenting that. Then we go into creating a system and educating how to do that task. And then we're going to hire a VA and pass all that off to them. Right. So now what we're doing is we're removing we're buying back our time by doing this. Right. So when we talk about operations, that's what we really educate on. And that's what I think people really need to focus on in their business is like what comes up for them every single day or consistently to where we can document that, train somebody on it, and then pass that task off to get some time. Right. So in our mastermind, the mastermind that you and I joined, we had somebody in our group that was saying that he was able to add an additional workday to his team because his team created all those tasks, right? Remember that?
Yep.
Right. So he was able to, his team was able to take a step back and say, okay, what tasks come up every single day that we can automate through systems or technology. And they were able to automate so many different tasks that it actually added an additional workday through that. So do you want to clarify on that a little bit? Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, I do remember that conversation really, really well. It was, and he has some really cool team members. It sounded like so they took the initiative, right? They had a proactive approach where they looked at what could be more efficient in the business, and they created systems to save a little bit of time in different places. And when you add it all up, it turned out to be like a full working day, which is incredible.
Right. And that's, that's the mindset that we have to get into, right? Is like, how do we do this in our business? Because then that's going to free us up to do more of the stuff that we want to do, right? Find more properties, create better experiences, relax, take a week off, right? So like the only way to get there is through the right systems and operations. One thing that I would love to chat about is like, we're buying this property in a week from now. And, you and I kind of divide and conquer on how we're going to take this property. I'm focusing on the acquisition and the branding and all of that. And you're focused on like the takeover plan, right? And that whole thing is operations from day one. Doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect, but we're taking an approach of having a takeover plan. Can you touch on that a little bit as far as like your vision of like, how do we go into this? How do we take it over? And then, what part of this is the operation side?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two parts to it, right? Because number one, I want to document everything that we do, every single step that we take. I want to document because this is not the only property that we're going to purchase, right? So in the future, we're going to be purchasing more properties, and then we have a blueprint in place for how to do that. What are the steps involved? Because there's so many steps involved. So I see it, the way that I devise the plan is basically it has two parts. It's what number one is like the actual taking it over. And then number two is like the continuous operations as we run it. Now, I think, like one thing that I learned, or a couple of things that I learned from us really focusing on systems is number one, you want to document everything and create the most efficient system for everything that you do right from the get-go. what you don't want to do, because it's really easy to think like, oh, well, we only have this one property to run. It's pretty easy. Like we don't need to document everything. Like some things are common sense and we can just do it. But yeah, what I learned is like we want to have everything in place from the get-go, because for several reasons. Number one, when you write down how you're going to do something or how you're doing something, it forces you to think like, is this actually the best way of doing it?
Yeah.
Because like in the past, I find myself doing something and in my mind, I knew it wasn't the most efficient way to do it, but I would just keep doing it just out of habit, just out of laziness to change it. And then the moment I have to document it and put it in the playbook, like I feel a bit embarrassed documenting it the way that I was doing it, because I know it's not the best way to do it. So that triggers me to actually change the way that that I'm doing things. So that's that's another reason. And then the next thing is, we want to start, like, obviously, like in the beginning, I'm going to do a lot of the stuff myself, but I want to get myself out of it as soon as possible, right? And the only way to do that is to have all the documentations in place, right? So, examples of this is, how are we putting together an Airbnb listing, and what kind of settings do we use, right? And what communications do we send out? All right, you mentioned technology. So in my mind, technology is part of a system, right? The system is how do we communicate with our guests? Well, that system contains the messages that we send out, but it also contains like, how do we send out these messages? What tools are we using? All of that stuff. So yeah, there's a lot that comes to it, but I think the main thing for me is, every minute that you can save in a business, it adds up, especially when you have repeated tasks, right? It just adds up over the long time. So we just have to be really, really disciplined and just really meticulous when it comes to building these systems. Like every single step that we can take out, we have to take it out, right? So that that it involves the least amount of human time to run.
Yeah. Well, I'm even finding myself now falling in the trap of just taking action and not taking the time to document what I'm doing with this purchase, right? And I think that's where, as entrepreneurs, we fall into the trap of getting ourselves so deep into the business that when we talk about operations and building a system, we understand that it's important, but then it's like, oh my God, I don't even know where to start with this. So your advice of like, hey, let's start immediately, it's 100% accurate, man. Like that's where the value is going to really come from. It's like, who cares what it looks like? Just start documenting, right? Like, okay, I had, I had this problem with this guest. This is how I responded. This was the result, blah, 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 right? I found the cleaner. This is how I found the cleaner. This is how I negotiated. This is how they're showing up. This is how I'm dealing with it. And having one centralized location for all of this stuff that you can slowly build over time, right? There's still systems that you and I are building or perfecting that we started building from day one of our business, right? And it's like, these things are never going to stop. So like now in the beginning stages of creating this, like no matter what it is, messaging, cleaning, finding properties, document every single step. And some advice too for people who aren't good at like creating actual documents or writing down. It doesn't have to be a physical system as far as like a spreadsheet or a document. In the early stages, I was doing voice notes, voice recordings of this, or I was doing Zoom videos, recording the Zoom videos and just documenting it. Like, hey, this would happen. This was the result. This is, how I dealt with it, whatever it is. And then I can go back and start documenting from there. So whatever the process is, like whatever works for you, just document it, because that's how we're going to get you out of the business. The other thing too is like, taking over this property. It's really interesting because we're taking over somebody else's short-term rental business, right? And like the hosts that are running this property, they're doing it their way and it works for them. But it's so funny to see how many people don't have any type of systems in place. And when it comes to removing them, everything just falls down around them. These hosts that we're buying this short-term rental business off of, they take down their reservations on a piece of paper. Like they just write down in a notebook on a blank piece of paper, the reservations and the details. And then they send me a photo of like, hey, this is what we have in the books. I'm like, man, this is a freaking nightmare. I'm like, do you have any SOPs? And they don't know what SOPs are, like all these challenges, and it works for them, but they're so deep in the business that when we go to take over, it's so challenging to maintain what they're doing. So right from the beginning, you and I have to hit the ground really hard with systems and operations. We're not focused on marketing. We're not focused on scaling and building the other units. It's all about how do we take what's currently working now? Like, how do we take these 4 units and inject operations into it as fast as possible to keep it going as a machine? Because if we don't do that, that's where all of our time is going to be involved. And that takes away from the branding and the marketing, which is going to really have the biggest impact on this business. And then the scale side for us on this property is building the 10 other cabins on the property, right? That's our scale side. That's where I want it. That's where we should be putting our time, is in how do we get more units on there as fast as possible, creating really cool experiences? And then how do we rebrand and remarket this property in a modern way? Because we know, I mean, we looked at it and it's like, hey, just by taking new photos, creating a new Airbnb listing, updating and optimizing the Airbnb listing and injecting some pricing tools and stuff like that, we can see an increase in pricing on the ADR 10 to 20%. Without doing anything on these properties other than marketing. But we're not going to do that until our operations are in place, right? And when I see a lot of people doing, because like I'm drawn to that, right? I'm drawn to that stuff because that's sexy, that's cool. It's like an artist approach to it. Operations freaking boring, right? And like doing it, it's work. But I know the moment that we go in there and we figure that out, like we figure out, okay, where's the linens going? How do we do the turnovers? How do we pay our cleaners? How do we pay our manager? How do we deal with noise issues? How do we deal with all this stuff? Once we figure that out and we have systems, we can rely on the systems and then focus on the sexy stuff of how do we make more money? So it's interesting, like we're taking over this property in a week, and I'm talking to the cleaners now. And my first question to them is, what are your operations? How do you run this property? Do you have any systems? Do you have any documentation on how you do this? And then 2 is, where can we improve on these properties? Like, where do you need more support so you can do what you want to do on these 4 units as effectively as possible? So I think once we get that under control, the scale side and then the brand side is going to become easier for us to get after. But right away, that takeover plan is going to be the most important thing, is like, how do we maintain the properties now? How do we inject some new systems and new technologies so then we can scale and do the rebrand? It's an interesting journey, man, taking over someone else's short-term rental business that has 0 systems in place.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, it's super interesting to take over somebody's business in the first place. Yeah. I think it's the first time for you and I both buying an actual business. So that's really interesting. What I'm actually quite excited to build that machine. And I totally agree. Like we have to have a really, really solid machine before we start moving to, building the new units, everything. But to me, it's like pretty exciting to build it, because it's a challenge. It's like, how do we run this as smooth as possible? How do we take away as many steps as possible in any process? You're mentioning like the owners and taking a picture of a reservation. I remember when I first started my Airbnb back in 2012, that's how I did it with my cleaner too. Like a reservation would come in on Airbnb and I would take a picture and like send it to her. All right. And eventually, I mean, obviously that's, that can be simplified a lot, because, at some point I realized like, okay, if I give her access to my Airbnb listing, then she's going to see the reservations coming in, and I can remove that step. Like I don't have to do this anymore. And then it was like the communication with the guests, eventually I created a WhatsApp group and I would put myself, the cleaner, and the guest in the WhatsApp group, because otherwise, like because my cleaner was doing the check-in, so then, and I wanted to know like what's the communication that he's sending. So she would like send me the conversations and I would read them later. And I was like, wait, if I put them all in one WhatsApp group, then I can see the communication. So it's like, that mindset of just like, how do we remove steps? How do we simplify it as much as we can? And again, I think on the, on the micro level, that might feel like, oh, you're only saving a few minutes. It only takes a few minutes to send that screenshot or whatever. But once you start, but that adds up, because a couple minutes a day, that turns into like half a work day at the end of the year, right? Yeah. So, and especially when you're scaling, it's just not scalable when you're having all these like, unnecessary steps involved.
Right. Yeah. And, I think we talked about this too, like the future of short-term rentals is the brand, hospitality brand. That's why in Legends X, we help people go from a hectic host to a hospitality brand. It's like, I think in the future, it's the values there for the guests, right? To seek out and connect with a brand that they can connect with on their values and the type of properties and experiences that they offer. But two is like, if we want to sell this business in the future, that's what people are really looking for. And these companies are really looking for to acquire are companies that have systems and operations in place so they can plug in and immediately start taking over. The only reason why we're buying this business is because it's part of the sale of the land that we want to buy, right? Otherwise, like this business is a mess, not really worth a lot of money, right? What's like the brand is not worth a lot. There's no systems. There's no equity in the company. The equity is in the property, right? So it's like immediately we're going to go in there and kind of rebuild all of that stuff. But the brand that we're developing, that's where the equity is going to be, because we're going to build the equity into the customer awareness, but also the systems. Like anyone who takes over this company from us in the future, if we ever decide to sell it, they're going to be able to step into a business, just like if you go and buy a McDonald's, right? Like if you're a manager at McDonald's and then you want to go buy and start your own, you're going to step into a business that already has systems and a structure and marketing and customer awareness, all of that stuff. You just have to operate it, right? So that's exactly what we're going to build with our brand. And I think anyone who's listening, if you have, 2 units or more, it's like, how do we build a brand? How do we build operations? How do we build this to a point where it's not reliant upon you, right? The buyer or the seller that's selling this business, she has to stay on for a bit. We negotiated with her that she's going to stay on as a consultant for us for up to a year because of all the complexities that she has built in this property. So, all these things, we're going to constantly go back to her to clarify. We don't want to extend that for a year, but I'm like, hey, I don't know what's going to come up during these different seasons. I need you available because there's no documentation on how you deal with this in your business. So, as a seller, it's like, I don't want to do that. If I sell my business in the future, I don't want to stay on as a consultant for a year. You want to stay on for a couple of months to help the transition, of course, but for a year, that's like, you can solve that through operations. So, but anyway, I know people that are listening to this are probably like, all right, cool. I want to build a business, but, and scale it, maybe not want to sell it. But regardless of where you guys are at, I think like anybody, it's like operations. We have our tech, but then we also have our process. If you do anything more than once, if you do anything more than one time, create a system and a process around how to do it. So then in the future, you could either reference it or train somebody on how to take over.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to it, right? It's forcing you to create a more efficient process. Number two, one thing I realized as well is it's not just about the time that you're saving. It's also the brain power that you have to apply, if that makes sense. Like, yeah. I feel like I have a limited amount of brain power every day to do things. And every time I have to go into my mind and think like, oh, where can I find this? Or what's the next step? Every time I have to go into my memory, like it takes away from my brain power. And at some point, it's empty. And then I can't really do anything useful anymore for the rest of the day. I can still do like a mindless stuff, or go to the gym or whatnot, but I can't be creative anymore. Like that,
Right.
that brain power is then just gone. So
No, that's a
yeah,
good
by the
point, man.
way, you mentioned McDonald's. You've seen the movie The Founder, right?
Yeah. Great movie.
I watched it again a couple weeks ago, and that's, if you haven't watched this movie, you got to watch this movie, because it really shows you how the power of systems. Because I mean, think about it, McDonald's, like the quality of the food, is arguably that's not why they became so big, right? It's the fact that somebody can show up at the counter and within 30 seconds you have your burger, right? And that's because of the systems.
Speedy system. Yeah, I talk about this a lot to explain the Legends X program. So the people that apply for a strategy call and I'm on the call with them, I walk them through the process of how we created the program of Legends X, going from vision, operation, scale, and saying the reason why we have scale at the very last part of the program is because we got to dial in the vision of understanding where we're going and what we're building, who we're serving, all of that. Then turning that vision into a machine so then we can scale correctly, right? Now, McDonald's didn't just go out and start scaling and opening up restaurants all over the place, right? They focused on really getting clear on what their vision was, right? So if you watch that movie, they talk about in the very early stages, the McDonald brothers were so focused on creating a unique restaurant, doing something no one's ever done before, right? And turning out these products, and they got rid of like the plates, they got rid of trays, they got rid of all this stuff, they got rid of the servers, and you have to go to the window, and like they developed the vision first of what they wanted to deliver. Then once they got that vision going, they focused on developing the speedy system, right? And developing how do we actually turn this vision into an actual machine. So when Ray Kroc showed up, what he noticed was the machine, right? That's what drew him in. So because they had the machine, he was able to go out and duplicate that machine in multiple different locations, right? And you'll see in the movie, right? Like it didn't work right away. There was a lot of optimization that they had to do to maintain brand standards. But it was because what happened was, as they started growing into the new locations, the vision wasn't being met, right? And he had to go out and find the right people to maintain the vision of what they created, right? Just by duplicating and trusting the system, right? So now this is, X amount of years later, and they have, everyone in the world knows what a McDonald's is, and they're literally in every part of the planet, right? They're probably going to be the first restaurant on Mars, right? Like it's going to happen, like they're going to expand out, but it is because they focused on the vision. They understood who they were serving, what problems they were solving. Then they developed the speedy system. And because of that, then they were able to go duplicate. There's absolutely nothing different from a McDonald's, like that process, to then developing and scaling an Airbnb business. The challenge that we have in our industry, like the hotel industry, is their process. It's easier. I shouldn't say easier. It becomes easier to run a hotel because you have everything in one location, right? Now with Airbnb businesses, like we now have our hospitality business spread out in multiple different locations all over the place, right? So I know that we like to compare our industry to the hotel industry because it's in hospitality. I like to compare it to McDonald's because McDonald's has one location, and they have one location, but all of their locations are spread out in different spots. It's not like a hotel, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you mean they have one brand but multiple locations?
One brand, multiple locations, right? So now the company has to figure out, how do we maintain the brand standards? How do we, if you go to Panama City and then you go to San Diego, how is that experience unique to Panama City, but the burger and the food and the systems are all the same, right? So it's like we can do the same exact thing with Airbnbs. And we can have them pretty much anywhere in the world, but we got to get clear on the vision of exactly what makes us different, who we're serving, why, what we stand for, what the brand standards are, then develop our own process, our own speedy system. And only then can we then go scale into multiple different locations. Right. So yeah, I suggest that everybody to watch that movie, The Founder, get into that book, or get into that movie, because that's going to really open up your eyes of how to really scale a business. But then too is like getting a good understanding of how we design Legends X with vision, operations, scale.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty good analogy, actually. And the more I think about it, the more it makes sense.
Yeah.
Compare it to that movie, and it's a great movie to watch anyway. Like I watch it, like I think I watched it 3 times now, and every time I watch it, I still enjoy watching it, and I watch it without me getting distracted.
Right. Yeah.
It's a cool story.
McDonald's, bro.
Awesome, man. Man, time flies. We've been talking for like 30 minutes already. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. And then for anyone who's listening to, like, we're gonna starting next week. We're gonna start documenting the whole process of our property, buying the property, taking it over, doing the operations, figuring that out, then going into the brand development, going into the scale side of the different cabins, all of that. This is something that we've been working on in the background of, like, getting our team involved and figuring out our channel on, where to do this. So anyone who's interested in that process, I'm going to do my absolute best to go deep into documenting the entire experience, right? And then over the next 12 months, essentially document the whole experience from day one of us buying this property. And then as we start scaling into different locations, making offers and all this stuff, like, we got some pretty big, visions for this brand. So anyone who's interested in that detail stuff, you and I will always come back and, like, we'll do a high-end overview on this podcast, but, like, the details of in the moment. And I promise I'm not just going to share the good stuff. I'm going to share everything that we're learning, like when we drop the ball, what we're learning, what we're winning, where we're failing, that whole thing, try to make it as real as possible. We're gonna document the whole experience on TikTok, right? So that's gonna be our channel to do that, and we're gonna start starting next week when we buy the. Is it next week or the following week?
No, it's next week, man. It's next week.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Know, right?
It's freaking nuts. So starting next week.
You're gonna be at the property next week, right?
Yeah, so me and Aaron, so our COO of Overnight Success, are going to drive up there. Samantha is going to be with us as well, and we're going to document the whole thing. So driving up San Diego, doing the closing, walking through the property for the first time, going through so what we did was we blocked out the calendar for a month, right? So we buy it next week, I think Thursday or Friday. And then for a month, we blocked out the calendar so we can get in there and focus on some improvements. Understanding our inventory, getting everything set up, building, optimizing the listings, because we're taking over the existing Airbnb listings, taking over the website, setting up all our tech, like getting all the operations set up. So starting next week, we're going to start documenting that. So I'm going to walk everybody through the properties. Then I'm going to put together some lists of where we're going to optimize some safety stuff in there, and, some basic experience stuff. And then also I'm going to focus on where I want to upgrade the experience of the property, right? So we're going to start documenting that. Aaron's going to come with me. I'm just going to kind of be like, he's going to be behind the phone, and I'm going to be walking through the property, and we're going to be sharing that on TikTok. We're going to reshare it all on Instagram as well, on my personal Instagram. But the one channel that we're really focused on growing is TikTok. So for the listeners, anyone who's on that platform, follow me there. And if you're not, follow me on Instagram, because we're going to share it there. And then you and I will come back once a week and kind of do a overview of everything. So
yeah, for sure. So the way to find you on TikTok, Eric Muller. I actually created a TikTok account just so that I could follow you.
That's awesome.
Follow one person.
Yeah. So my tag is Eric D. Moeller. So Eric, ERIC, D as in Daniel, MOELLER. And that's on Instagram and TikTok as well.
Yeah. We'll put those links up in the show notes as well. Yeah, so if you go to getpaidforyourpad.com, just go to show notes, and then we'll have all the links there. But yeah, you're crushing it on TikTok. You're becoming
it's funny, man. It's become a new, I don't know, it's become a new channel that's growing really, really fast. And it's simple because, it's I like Instagram, but it's really distracting, extremely distracting, where TikTok, as of right now, it's like I'm looking at it as a educational resource center, right? So I'm just like, I'm connecting, people are asking questions, and I'm able to film it and toss it up real quick. People really dig that. But then also we can go through and do these educational pieces of like walking through the property of, hey, this is where we're going to optimize this. This is where we're going to improve this. So like it goes everything from like 30-second videos to about 2 minutes. So it's really short and right to the point. It's all videos, which is awesome as well. But yeah, I think we have like 16 or 17,000 followers right now, which is awesome. We started a month ago on TikTok. So our goal is to really grow that in an organic way. So yeah, if you guys are on there, follow me there. It's a good way to connect, and I'm in there as well, responding to messages and really connecting with as many people as possible.
Yeah, and I read that the amount of hours that people spend watching TikTok videos in the US has now overtaken YouTube.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's the fastest growing channel. There is, with all these companies, social media companies, there is a lot of love-hate behind this. Like as an individual, the way the company itself, I'm not 100% a fan of what their vision is of that tool. But the customer base and the usage of it is really incredible. I've never connected with this many people this fast. Mm-hmm. So we're like, all right, let's go all in. Let's scale it. Let's see how well that goes. We have a lot of people joining Legends X off of TikTok, which is really cool. We're helping people get started on Airbnb off of TikTok. But also for Airbnb, for hosts, creating a TikTok account around your property, I think that's going to scale faster than creating an Instagram account for your property, right? To really scale Instagram right now, it takes a lot because there's so many people on there. There's so many people monetizing it. So Facebook company, they make it really challenging for you to grow an Airbnb or to grow an Instagram account. Not impossible, but you got to really invest. You got to understand that platform and do it correctly. Where TikTok, because they're growing so fast and people are on there, it's like if you have a unique property and you're doing something that's really cool on in Airbnb, you can use TikTok to scale your operations marketing wise. We're going to do this for our brand, for our property brands, and I think it's a good platform to use for marketing. Just don't get to, we gotta become, we have to look at these platforms as we have to decide our relationship with these platforms. And I'm talking to everybody here, right? And like, especially us, you and I, like we have to decide our relationship with these platforms. Are we consumers of these platforms, or are we creators on the platform? Right. So I've chosen to be a creator on the platform. So that what that looks like is I literally never been on TikTok. I don't want to download TikTok. It's not on my phone. Right. I want to create the content and I want to give it to Cece, our team member, who's building that on the platform. Right. Because I know I don't want to go on there and consume all these different videos and get distracted like I am on Instagram. I've looked at Instagram and said, okay, I'm going to be a consumer of Instagram. So all the channels I follow, it's like my books and podcasts and all this stuff that I listen to, it's stuff to educate me, right? So I'm choosing to be a consumer on Instagram. But even that is distracting because their algorithms have designed it to show you all these like shiny objects and bring your attention. So I download it, I consume on the platform for a bit, and then I delete it off of my phone, right? So if you're choosing to use Instagram or TikTok or Facebook to promote your Airbnb business, you have to ask yourself, are you consuming or are you creating, right? And as you go onto those platforms, tell yourself that I'm a creator on this platform, so you don't get distracted with all the shiny objects that are on there. When you do want to consume, tell yourself, okay, I'm going to consume right now for the next 15 minutes, and go on there and follow our channel, follow all the channels that inspire you, stuff like that. And the reason I'm saying this is we don't want to create another channel that distracts us. We want to use these things to grow us and our business, right? And our knowledge base.
Yeah, but I think I think it could be interesting using TikTok right now, because it's just you're still a bit ahead of the curve with. I mean, if you would have started to promote your Airbnbs like in 2013 on Instagram, I'm sure you know that you could crush it, right? It's like when you're early to the platform, it's just easier to get exposure than when it's already kind of saturated, right? So
I agree.
yeah, awesome, man. All right, well, that's it, man. We'll talk next week. Until all listeners, thank you for listening. I hope you have a great week, and see you next time.
Peace out.